signs, the little looks, the bitter goodbyes. I thought we'd make it through somehow, But then it came, all the slamming doors. I blinked and it's over. I don't feel like I felt before. Wish I'd do it all over. You never know just what you got into. It's gone. You never know just what you got into. It's gone. You used to call, I wouldn't pick up. You used to say you're no the one. I used to think you're just for now. But then it came, all the slamming doors. I blinked and it's over. I don't feel like I felt before. Wish I'd do it all over. You never know just what you got into. It's gone. You never know just what you got into. It's gone. got them. Gone, 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 gone.
Let me be the change I want to see, to do with strength and wisdom all that needs to be done, and become the hope that I can be. Set me free from my fears and hesitation. Resurrection is me. Fill me with spirit to face the challenge. And so the change I long to see. Today I start the change I want to see. Even if I'm not the light, I can be the spark in faith, service, and communion. Let us start the change we want to see, the change that begins in me. Today I start the change I want to see.
Even if I'm not the light,
I can be the spark in faith, service, and communion. Let us start the change we want to see, the change that begins in me.
Jesus in us,
Jesus in
mayang magiliw, kaya sa silangan, alam ng puso, sa dibdib mo'y buhay. Lupang hinirang, duyan na ng magiliw, sa manlulupig, di ka masisi. Sa nagandang mundong sisimoy at sa langit mamahal, may nilagang tulat, awit sa panayang minamahal. Ang isap ng watawat mo'y tagumpay na nagdininig. Ang bituin ng araw niya kailan pa may di magdidilim. Lupa ng araw na luwan, ating pagsinta, buhay langit sa Pinoy. Aming ligaya ng pangay ng ating ang mamatay ng dahil sa'yo.
Good morning, everyone, and welcome to Pinoy Power Voters Education Webinar in the Sasolian Family Days 2021 with the theme LSU, Our Family. I am very empowered to be the master ceremony of this event since this Pinoy Power Voters Education is designed to ensure that voters are ready, willing, and able to participate in electoral politics. Now let us all be welcomed and enlightened by our University Student Government Senator, Mr. Angel Acapulco, for his opening remarks.
Good morning, Twinkle. Good morning, everyone. The Lasallian Family Days is an annual celebration of solidarity of the Lasallian community in Ozamis. This year's celebration adopts the theme LSU Our Home, Our Family. The theme embodies the purpose of the celebration to create communities within the Lasallian community, which is anchored on interests and advocacies, to build capacities among these communities, which will act as their foundation, and community building to ensure the long-term existence and health of these communities. In line with this celebration, we are gathered in this virtual conference to discuss the importance of suffrage as our basic right as a Filipino citizen. This webinar session is intended to educate the Lasallian community of their power to vote, especially in the upcoming national election in the year 2022. With this, I would like to express my sincere gratitude to all of you for coming here. At the same time, I am delighted to welcome you all to this event. Enjoy and be enlightened because your voice will be heard and your votes will define the future of our country. Thank you and Animo Lasal.
Thank you so much, Mr. Acapulco, for your opening message. Indeed, La Salle University Llanes are trying to help citizens understand and participate in elections other than as a contestant or a supporter. All right, I believe we are all ready to listen to our guest speaker this morning. At this point, I will be introducing to you our resource speaker. He is an associate professor of philosophy at Ateneo de Davao University and the former chairperson of the Department of Philosophy. He holds a doctorate in philosophy from the University of San Carlos in Cebu City as maxima cum laude. He obtained his Erasmus Mundus Masters in Applied Ethics degree from Linköping University in Sweden and the Norwegian University of Science and Technology in Trondheim, Norway. He completed his master's in philosophy from the Ateneo de Manila University. He graduated AB Philosophy as cum laude at the Ateneo de Davao University. He was twice the EM representative for Applied Ethics and was a delegate to the 2007 Erasmus Mundus GA in Brussels, Belgium. He was trained in democracy and governance at the Konrad Adenauer Stiftung in Bonn and Berlin, Germany. Lasallians, please help me welcome Dr. Christopher Ryan B. Maboloc.
A pleasant
Morning, Mr. Christopher.
pleasant morning to everyone. I
All
am
right, sir. So how are you today, sir? And may I ask you a question? What will the students expect from you from today's session?
it is me who has expectations from students. I want you to ask some questions so that you get to be clarified on a host of issues that you should be able to reflect on and possibly discern as young adults.
All right. So thank you so much in advance, sir. And I believe that you have prepared something for us. Now, once again, let's give the floor to Dr. Christopher Ryan Maboloc.
Pleasant morning to the students of LaSalle University of Samis. I'd like to thank the organizers of this event and your administrators and also the student government organization for this very relevant topic that we will be discussing today. We will be talking about politics in the short term, and that is the forthcoming 2022 elections. So, now, why is political education crucial? If we go outside of our comfort zones, we realize that there are people who need our help. And the problem really is that there is a limit to what the individual can do. And it is in this respect that it is crucial that our institutions should be functioning because we are considered to be a democratic country. And as a democratic country, it is incumbent upon our public officials to be able to deliver to the people those things that cater to their interests. Public office is a public trust, the 1987 Constitution says. How do we translate this into concrete terms? Firstly, there are things that we call the responsibility of the state, and these are a matter of policy. When we speak of policy, we refer to the ends, the goals, the objectives that the society sets in order to, number one, give comfort to the people, alleviate them from their difficult situations. But more importantly, it's about how we translate some theoretical concepts, including rights, entitlements, desert, and all of those things that characterize what it means to be a citizen of the republic. And secondly, there are what we call the duties of citizens, the duties of individuals, the duties of persons. At one time in China, there was a 5-year-old kid who was overrun by a van. No one in the street attempted to rescue the child until a second van overran the child, which caused the instant death of that young individual. That kind of incident caught on video is symptomatic of the society that needs reform. When we speak of reform, reform can be personal. There is the individual who makes better judgments, and thus he has to consider possessing those principles necessary to be able to pursue the good life. The good life is a matter of a life plan, which means that I, as an individual, should be able to secure for myself those principles that are necessary so that I make the right judgments in life. On the other hand, there is also what we call the collective sense of our obligations, which means that I admit that as an individual, there is a limitation to what I can actually do. And it is for this reason that my country, its basic institution, the very structures of government should be able to function in order to deliver what people actually deserve from their public officials. And thus, the important aspect of this is how do we define this sense of obligation? Now, the individual during the time of Aristotle cannot just be a citizen. Aristotle was not really a believer in democracy because he thought that to be able to really accomplish the basic tenets and requirements of being a good, responsible member of the state, one has to be intelligent. It is an attribute that, sad to say, a lot of officials do not have. It's not to undermine really the state, the situation of the way the government functions sometimes, but rather it is a testament to the post-colonial culture that we possess. It's a kind of systemic injustice and imbalance that has been matter of historical necessity given to us by those people who have colonized us and wanted really to destroy and distort our sense of nationhood so that power is concentrated on the hands of the few, thus depriving the majority of the opportunity to be able to exercise their power to choose on their own volition, on the basis of their will, the kind of government that is due them. And so, in defining the meaning of this moral obligation, it's crucial that we go back to Aristotle. So, what does it mean to be a citizen? For Aristotle, a citizen is somebody who has something to contribute to the agora of public ideas. This means that the basic requirement of being a responsible citizen is to be able to suggest something intelligent in order to improve the state. And this implies that when we talk about things that concern the government, and when we talk of government, we do not refer only to people who are in positions of power. Government refers to everybody because we are supposed to be a democracy. What is crucial in this regard is to be able to consider what people can actually do so that they can help their country. So meaning to say, the emphasis will have to be not only on the entitlements of individuals, what we can get from government, but rather what we can contribute to our own development as a nation. So voting in that respect has something to do with nation building. If we want to change society, if we want to reform basic institutions, then we have to choose wisely. Now, in unraveling what that means, it's not, however, right to say that we have to blame the poor who are lured on the basis of political machinery and money politics so that they choose those people who do not really protect and promote their interests. Rather, we have to look at it from a structural perspective, the vantage point of society wherein people are subjected to historical, political, and economic injustices so that they become powerless, so that they are forced and coerced to choose those people, even if it is against their will. The reason they're being is that they have no other means except to be transgressed. Insofar as in this kind of society that we have, the inequalities are things that have been imposed upon us. Firstly, by our colonizers. Secondly, it has become a systemic mechanism that undo the power and ability of our freedoms to really choose well. So the whole point is that we cannot blame the poor for constantly choosing candidates who do not qualify nor deserve to be holding their positions. What we need to understand is that there are systemic injustices that deprive our basic structure, including our political culture, of the ability to provide the kind of mechanism wherein when people choose, they actually choose those individuals whom they believe can promote and protect their interests as citizens of the state. I'd like to share my screen so that I can do you see the slides, Miss MC? Can you see the slides, Madam Host? Okay. So there's an image here. This is actually an old image that went viral on social media. Maybe the image is a decade old, and we wonder what has happened to this young boy, and we assume it is his sibling. This says a lot about our society. Firstly, it provokes us and makes us feel angry about our country. How come, as a democratic country, we have not been able to protect our children and provide for them the necessary implements so that they are able to live a life that is dignified? Any father, any decent living human being cannot allow a situation like this. But nonetheless, it is a situation that is prevailing in our country. And we refer to this as the reality of extreme poverty. From the viewpoint of the basic structure and from the vantage point of structural analysis, this is a manifestation of powerlessness. How people, in view of their inability to use to the fullest extent the value of their autonomy, and I mean the parents of this kid, are unable to really find for themselves a life that is worth living. Our church has taught us, as good Christians, to be compassionate. But in situations like this, compassion is actually secondary. in the minds of people. What comes to mind is that they will say that government has not been doing enough in order to address the problem of poverty. Well, based on data, according to the ASEAN Development Bank, poverty incidence in the country has been reduced from 19% when President PINOY left office to 16% as of the moment. However, this has been exacerbated by the COVID-19 pandemic, so that last year there was a contraction of 9.5% in our gross domestic product, which means that it will eventually have a great impact in the lives of poor people. Now, there is this assertion that the country during the time of then President Marcos was progressive as compared to the time post-EDSA. But data, however, belies such a claim. Fact of the matter is that if we look at our economy, we are actually, compared to other countries in Asia, so like beneath this development trajectory, and this is on the basis of GDP, per capita income. If we compare ourselves even to Malaysia, we are far behind. All the more if we compare ourselves to Thailand, and our favorite source of love stories, South Korea. They're way up in terms of the gross domestic product per capita. And the 80s to 1986, we are at the bottom of the field. Okay, so, and we experienced some kind of recovery beginning in 2003. But while we are recovering, however, other countries have actually shoot up in terms of their progress and development. If by way of comparison, for instance, in 2014, a data from Bloomberg says that the foreign direct investments received by Singapore totaled something like $67 billion on that year. That's 2014. In comparison, the Philippines received no more than $1 billion in terms of investments. Thailand, which thought of its tourism as like a big source of its income, actually welcomed something like 40 million tourists prior to the pandemic, and on average they have something like 36 million tourists every year. The Philippines, in contrast, only has a target. We target 6 million tourists. Prior to the pandemic, we had something like 4 million tourists, 5 million tourists, but we have not really achieved that goal of inviting foreigners to our beautiful country. And even foreign direct investments are getting out of the country. Why is that so? The reason is it's a question of stability. And in the absence of political stability, a country will find it really difficult to invite foreign investments. Now, let me say something about China. Now, the Cultural Revolution of Mao caused a ripple effect to the population of that country, and it has actually resulted to famines and more than 1 million deaths. When Deng Xiaoping took over in 1980, he was actually what you call a technocrat. So what he did was he went to and visited Western countries like France, and in Asia he visited Japan and observed how they have achieved economic growth and development. And he thought and reflected that country cannot achieve growth if it is backward in terms of its mentality. And it is for that reason that he opened China to foreign capital. So China, in that sense, has remained communist in terms of its political system and ideology, but it has welcomed Western money. And in that respect, it has invited billions of dollars of investments into the country, allowing big American corporations, including the manufacture of your Apple gadgets, to China. And this has actually been a miracle story because in the last decade, China was able to lift out of poverty more than 700 million of its citizens. And so the whole point in that respect is that it is really possible to be able to change a country, to reform a country, if and when government leaders have the foresight and the political will to instill discipline, reforms, and that singular mindset that above all else, we have a country that we need to build. Now, one of the biggest problems as to why we cannot get rid of our, say, label as the sick man of Asia is corruption. So, if you look at this graph, the corruption perception index for ASEAN countries, in terms of rank, and as regard to how we have not been able to really get rid of corruption in government, we're very, very far if we compare ourselves to Singapore. Well, of course, technocrats will try to say that Singapore is not even larger than Subic. And so it's easier to manage and develop that state. Well, that's just an excuse. So in truth, I have listened to a talk to Washington CSIP. He was 95 years old at that time. He was president of a society of Harvard graduates here in the Philippines, and I got to be invited to his office where I saw the 100 million peso painting of Ang Kyokok. CSIP says that democracy will not work in the Philippines. Will not work in the Philippines because Filipinos, according to CSIP, following the position of Lee Kuan Yew in Singapore, the former prime minister, we lack that kind of mindset as regard to making the interests of the common good a priority more than our own interests. However, Amartya Sen, so in Development as Freedom, according to this book, so he says that it is not really correct to say that it is discipline nor an authoritarian type, even if it is benevolent kind of administration is necessary in order to improve the situation of a country. He said that Sen writes in Development as Freedom, what you need really is, number one, you need a literate citizen. By literate, we do not mean that people can just read and write. What we mean is that people are really reading. So they're reading books. It's different. There's a difference when you say people are able to read. They can read, but they are not reading. So what's the point and what's the use? So it's necessary that when we say literate, people understand a host of issues and do not just follow what they read online. Rather, they should be able to analyze issues, reflect on them, criticize positions, and make their own positions. Secondly, infrastructure. If you compare a country to Singapore, we lag behind in terms of infrastructure. When we speak of infrastructure, we mean investments. And by that, we mean government will have to invest, including the private sector. Now, one key issue right now is the Skyway Stage 3 in Manila. Ramon Ang has decided to close it in order to finish the ramps necessary because the toll regulatory board has prevented them from collecting tools. Now, that serves as a problem. Why? Because there seems to be a lack of coordination and the policies are not clear-cut. It's necessary to have clear policies so that investors will want to put their money, and this money is basically important because without that money, you cannot have jobs. And without jobs, you cannot have household income. And when you do not have household income, you cannot send a child to school. Without money, you cannot provide a child good or quality health care. Without money, you cannot live decently. And if government is not clear in terms of its policies, then it results to a host of problems. Our problem in that respect is we lack transparency, which is a third requirement according to Amartya Sen. And it is where this whole idea of corruption comes into the picture. The Prime Minister of Singapore earns something like $1 million US dollars, translated from Singaporean dollars, annually as salary. Well, any of the elected president in the Philippines do not actually need any money because no poor man can ever be elected to office, nor can a poor man dream of getting into that high position. But the basic idea is, in terms of a bureaucracy, the salaries of our top bureaucrats, from regional directors to provincial to city directors, including our policemen, have been improved. And so it's necessary to make that study to compare past bureaucrats with current bureaucrats who are receiving more, including state professors and faculty members in terms of salary. Has this improved the quality of service that they have given to the people? And if not, what is wrong? Is it a question of culture? Is the problem systemic that you really have to dismantle the ideology of Philippine democracy and change it into something else? So that's one big issue that we need to examine. And the implication here is that when we get to choose our leaders, we shouldn't choose somebody who is corrupt. It's a simple logic. If somebody buys your vote, then presumably that person, as we all know, will simply recover his investments during the elections when he is in position of power. Now, another issue that we need to consider is the prevalence of political dynasties in the Philippines. This is a graphical map, of the presence of the dynastic families in the country. Let me read some data. Okay. So, for instance, half of the members of the Philippine Congress belong to political families. Of this number, according to a report from Rappler, 88 are in Luzon, 29 in the Visayas, and 44 are in Mindanao. Of the 24 senators that we have, 14 senators are from a powerful clan or family. And it bespeaks a lot of the reality of political dynasties in the country. Now, what's the implication? The implication is here. So, and this was a survey that was done like almost a decade ago. So, in a province where there is the presence of political dynasties, you expect that the situation of people is dire. There is poverty where there are political dynasts. So here, if you see, if you look at the poverty incidence in Lanao del Sur, so it's 67% in 2012. In Maguindanao, it's half. Okay? In Apayao, it's half. Eastern Samar, it's 55%. In Negros, it's 43%. And the reason for this is if you have political dynasties, it's like you do not really have a host of options as to whom you must elect into a position. And the problem is, if we keep on electing a member of a clan, that individual, of course, will not have the kind of competition necessary for him to really be inspired to do more and do better for the people. And it is for this reason that political dynasties are a problem. Now, how do you get rid of political dynasties? Congress is supposed to pass an enabling law. And this enabling law should be able to concretize what is put in the Constitution. Yet, as I have mentioned, since more than a majority of the members of Congress belong to a political clan or family, then by logic, they will not agree to that. Now, to make things fair, there are cities and provinces where you find political dynasties that is also progressive. Cebu is progressive. Davao City is progressive. Taguig is becoming dynastic, or at least a political family is ruling the place, but it is also progressive. And so it brings to mind a basic question. What is really the problem? And so problem, if we try to analyze, is a question of competence. And by competence, we mean it's necessary to put the right people so that the problems and issues are intelligently addressed by the state and the government. Now, let's look at the 2016 presidential elections. Okay. This actually, this slide that you see was the final survey. And in May, President Duterte had 32%. Grace Poe had 25%. Manuel Rojas, 22%. Giju Marbinay, 15%. Miriam Santiago, 2%. Now, let's just go back to memory lane and determine the issues that concern these people. We begin with Binay. Of course, cases were filed against Binay on the grounds of corruption. So there were buildings that allegedly were being built like using overpriced estimates, and that affected his position in the polls. Binay was the first to declare to run for president, so after winning the vice presidency, and that has also diminished his chance insofar as it gave his critics the opportunity and leg time to be able to like really dump onto him a host of issues that he wasn't able to overcome. Now, Manuel Rojas lost for the reason that President Pinoy did not really, in terms of what was expected of him as regard to the moral reforms that we wanted from our government, although Pinoy was a good man, he wasn't really effective in terms of instilling good values and discipline. So the whole idea is that members of his like cabinet and those bureaucrats that he has appointed into positions have not really delivered, okay, this reform agenda that he has touted when he ran in 2010. And that affected the situation, the political fate of Manuel Rojas II. Grace po, there was the issue of citizenship. Grace po is an intelligent woman. So, but the thing there is that there is really that massive influence by social media that catapulted Rodrigo Duterte into a position. His political campaign was very effective in terms of, say, projecting the reality of historical injustice in Mindanao. And so that delivered the votes from Mindanao. And there was also clear political alignment from the North, and that delivered the votes to Rodrigo Duterte. But if you try to understand, it's not really the poor who supported President Duterte. It was the ABC class. Why? Because they felt the discomfort in the metropolis. They felt that the government has not been delivering in terms of efficient public services. The rising middle class, which constitute a lot of our young professionals, felt heavy traffic, lack of, say, efficient transportation as crucial in order to achieve a higher standard of living, which they did not feel at the latter part of the administration of Pinoy. And it is for this reason that they wanted a man who to them is somebody who can make things possible. And it is for that reason, because Duterte is perceived to possess political will, that sent him actually to the presidency. And so, politics is a matter of fortune, but it is also a question of perspective. And so, if we try to look into this picture, there's usually what we call a honeymoon period for leaders. During the first 2 years of those who have been elected as presidents, there's usually an improvement in terms of the gross product, meaning to say they are perceived to deliver to the people what has been expected from them. It's in the latter part of the administration where the problem becomes more manifest. So during the time of Cory Aquino, there was 5.6% average growth for the GDP. And that is actually expected because we had almost zero growth during, and even negative growth during the last years of Marcos in Malacanang. So Ramos touted the country as a tiger economy. Now, in contrast, Cory Aquino wanted the Philippines to be a newly industrialized country in year 2000. I was in high school when that slogan was introduced. And so we can ask ourselves right now, it's actually 2020, if we have actually been a newly industrialized country. It's a big question that we actually now know the answer. Now, Joseph Strada had 3.8%. Now, Joseph Strada is really your populist leader. Why? What is populism? Populism is when you try to create a wage, a kind of antagonism, a conflict between rich and poor, and then you put the blame on rich people as regard to the miseries of poor people. And so you begin to say things that will, quote unquote, help the poor. When in fact, what is happening is that not much change has actually been like affected in the country, and for that reason, people still are in their dire situation. Now, Arroyo, she's a strong leader. So I met Gloria Arroyo even in our barrio. It's funny because there was no sound system. And of course, local politics in the barangay is always like inefficient from the start, due to the absence of not only funds but the basic competence necessary. Right now, it has vastly improved, given many of the reforms instituted by the Department of the Interior and local government. But during our time, Gloria wasn't masungit when she was there. She just talked. There was a small project. There was a fund that she allotted for the barrio, and it's for a small park. And she was there. The park actually wasn't finished, and I'm aware of the corruption as regard to the building of that little park. But I'll not mention names, anyways. But what has happened during the time of Gloria was, she wanted a strong state, a strong republic, and she was able to maintain that position, and was able to at least overcome the coup attempts during her time. Now, Pinoy campaigned on the basis of, say, the desire to go after Gloria Macapagal Arroyo, which she big time failed because he wasn't able to send Gloria really to that kind of judgment in history, wherein in the same way as Marcos has been judged by history. And so Gloria was able to exonerate herself from the cases filed against her by the Aquino administration. And that includes election fraud. Now, the problem with Pinoy was it was as if he was after somebody, so after a woman that ditched him, and so he wanted to exact revenge against this person, forgetting that there are other people around him, so other women around him. So same problem. So you are too focused on one, and you forget that there are other aspects of the society that you have to consider and look into. And sadly, Pinoy wasn't able to really deliver the moral reforms and even political reforms that was promised when he ran for the position. Now here, what is our prospect for the future? This is the final slide. Okay. So you have prominent personalities here. So I'll begin, of course, with the daughter of the president, the mayor of Davao City, Sara Duterte. Idea here is that you have to consider the fact that what catapulted President Rodrigo Duterte to power in 2016 are no longer relevant. So if indeed Mayor Duterte chooses to run for a higher office, you no longer have that issue, for instance, that Mindanao must have its own place in history in terms of the highest position of the land. That's no longer an issue. The historical injustice against the Bangsamoro people is no longer an issue. And so those are very important issues really that catapulted President Duterte right now into that position, ato ni bay. So meaning to say, now is the time. Okay, so and that no longer holds true for President Duterte's daughter. Now, the big problem that the country needs to overcome, of course, is the economic consequences due to the COVID-19 pandemic. And right now, our problem is that we do not have vaccines. We do not have vaccines, not because of blah, 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 whatever you hear. We do not have vaccines because of global hegemony. What that means is that affluent countries invested in the research, production, and distribution of these vaccines, and so therefore they will prioritize their own citizens. America has vaccinated 1 out of 8 Americans, although there are many Americans who do not want the vaccines, especially those who supported former President Trump. But in the Philippines, our problem really is that we cannot get that assurance even from the COVAX facility. COVAX facility is a pooled purchase of the vaccines. COVAX is funded by the ADB to the tune of $12 billion and the World Bank to the tune of $20 billion, so that countries such as us can have equal access to the vaccines against COVID-19. But even COVAX has failed to deliver. WHO has noted early in March that at least 130 countries has not received a single dose of the vaccine. In the Philippines, we have something like 1 million doses of the vaccine, and it's not even enough for 1 million frontline healthcare workers that are serving 106 million population. So that's one thing. And if the president right now does not really change the situation of the country, then Mayor Sara Duterte expectedly will have to respond to that issue when 2022 comes. Now, Bongbong Marcos. Bongbong Marcos, of course, is the son of President Marcos, and you have what you call the solid north. Marcos loyalists will always vote for Marcos. I have a good friend who is Ilocano, and it's as if to him, President Ferdinand Marcos is still alive. So he will vote for Bongbong Marcos should Bongbong decide to run for president. So what does that mean? It means that not much change has happened really in terms of the political fortunes of our country. So, those who are in positions of power are part of the past regimes. A regime that we have actually condemned. Still, they are in the same position. And it bespeaks and reflects the kind of democracy that we have. It's a democracy that is, sad to say, it's a democracy that is failing the people. Now, you have Leni Robredo. Leni Robredo, of course, was the running mate of Mar Rojas. But Leni Robredo did not win because she is Leni Robredo. She won because those she ran against with, they did not really have anything to say that is of great significance. For instance, if a person voted for President Duterte in 2016, if you hear issues against the president, you will say to yourself that I choose somebody from the opposition so that you get that balance. That's simple. Chis Escudero was, of course, very prominent, but the moment he, had heart in evangelista in his heart, then that doomed his chance for power. A lot of these politicians think that when they marry somebody who is from showbiz, they'd secure winning their candidacies. It's the formula used by Kiko Pangilinan, Ralph Recto, and that was obvious at the time. But right now, you have Filipinos are exposed to social media, and their preferences have improved. And talking to young people, you must understand that the country is different right now. So there are things that have remained in terms of, say, how we like value those who are in positions of power in terms of our future. And by value, I do not mean positively, but sometimes negatively. But the fact of the matter is that people no longer listen to, for instance, black timers in the broadcast industry. Whereas in the 80s and the 90s and the early millennium, people were listening to these broadcast journalists. And we have tested also some broadcast journalists and put them into positions of power, like Vice President Noli de Castro, but is a total disappointment. I apologize for saying that. And Filipinos also chose prominent showbiz personalities like Ramon Revilla, and there was that insinuation that FPJ actually won the elections. Yet we also realized that these people do not really have what it takes to really like give the country and its people what is due them. And so you have Biko Soto, but Biko Soto cannot run because he's not qualified yet. You have Isko Moreno. Of course, right now the opposition really is looking for someone who will carry its political platforms in 2022. Robredo kasi is something like this perceived, I don't want to say it, perceived weakness. And even leaders of the political opposition feels that they do not really have what it takes to confront the president like man to man, so face to face. So the president is sometimes unsmiling, but people do not really care about that. So on the other hand, Leni Robredo, I do not know, but there's really a problem if you do not project that strong leadership when you are in transitory democracies like the Philippines, because our political and democratic system is fragile. If we do not choose well, not to mention any of these names now, if a leader is elected and that leader is weak, there's a problem when powers that be begin to imagine and start to do that adventure, and the country might succumb to such possibilities if indeed so we do not choose someone who has what it takes to be in a position to provide the people with that kind of clear vision that will allow it to reestablish the economy after the COVID-19 pandemic. And so, in conclusion, what does it mean for a young man to vote? Number one, it is your duty to vote. It is your duty to vote because if your voice is not heard, then you cannot contribute to the growth and development and the progress of your country. If you do not vote, then you're also committing a mistake, and you are actually perpetuating the injustice against the poor. Because what is important and what is crucial at this time is to be able to reflect on the right qualities of a person so that that person is able to deliver to the people what is necessary for them to attain a life of dignity and a life that is worth living. Thank you, and pleasant morning to everyone.
Right. So thank you so much, Dr. Christopher, and for instilling our minds that we need to vote in order to contribute to the growth and development of our country, the Philippines. All right. So on behalf of everyone here today, thank you to our dear speaker, Dr. Christopher Maboloc, for taking time out of his busy schedule to speak to us this morning. I believe we learned something and we also have some queries that need to be answered. Now is the time to raise your questions as our speaker will answer them for you. We encourage everyone to turn on your cameras and then raise your hand, and then we will be recognizing you, and then you may ask question to our resource speaker. All right, so once again, may I request everyone to turn on your cameras, and then you raise your hand, then we will be recognizing you, then after which you may ask your question. Or if you are shy, just comment down your questions in the comment section below. All right, so I believe we have a question earlier. We have a question earlier from Gladstone Quarteros. Gladstone? Sir Gladstone Quarteros. All right. So, Sir Gladstone. All right. So, a question from Sir Gladstone. Looking back now, did Duterte delivered on anti-corruption and on peace and order? So, once again, looking back now, did Duterte delivered on anti-corruption and on peace and order?
Well, we have to look into the data, and it's important to consider the literature. Based on some of my readings, the president, in terms of his, if we say, target, okay, so he wasn't able to do that. Okay. On the other hand, in terms of concrete accomplishments, if we talk of peace and order, he was able to, like, the basis of his, say, vision and aspiration, the Bangsang Moro Organic Law was passed, and that is crucial in terms of delivering peace to Muslim Mindanao. When we talk about peace and order, there are a host of things. Okay, there's the security aspect, there is the insurgency, there is also the problem of criminality, there is also the problem of foreign security and internal threats. Okay. Now, since there's not much of a major issue when it comes to, say, right now at least, terrorist threat, or even if there is that West Philippine issue thing of Chinese intrusion, but I believe that the president was able to hold the line. So, in order to maintain a peace and order situation wherein the majority of the people feels that they are protected in their homes and when they go out of the streets, at least prior to the pandemic. Okay? Now, if we mention what the critics are saying, because we have to be honest, since this is an academic discussion, there are problems with respect to, say, red tagging, and there is that feeling that the government, at least the state in that regard, is intruding into the freedoms of our educational institutions due to the presence of the police. If we cite, for instance, UP as an example, and most recently the raid at the University of San Carlos. Those are things that bother a lot of scholars. Okay? But overall, the picture is that the state has been able to maintain that situation and that position wherein people, we assume, so have trust in their government, and that their government is able to protect them from internal and external threats. Thank you.
All right, so we have another question from Engineer Hadilia. Given our political system, what would be the ultimate quality of a president that would help us choose during the election? And another follow-up question from her, would you agree with President Duterte's that presidency is not for women?
If we really talk about success stories, it really has got nothing to do with the qualities of a man. Rather, it has something to do with the quality of our basic institution. And when we talk about our basic institution, we refer to political culture, our rights, the functioning of our government, and thus it is a systemic problem. So that even if you put someone who is good and intelligent, he will have problems and troubles because he has to deal with a bureaucracy that is problematic and inept. And in the absence of those sort of things, someone who is morally, say, just, like, say, Pinoy, for example, will not be able to instill the vision that he wants for the country because of the resistance within the structure itself. On the other hand, while we have President Duterte who possesses political will, we also realize that he has to play his card insofar as he has to deal with political clans and dynasties, and that is important because if you do not also get the support from the ground, it would be impossible to deliver your promises to the people. And I mean that you have to work with Congress, and as we have mentioned, Congress is like, there many of its members come from political clans, and the president understands that. He's a pragmatic man, and so in the end he realizes that it doesn't really matter what the means that you employ. What is crucial is that you are to deliver what people expect from you, and that's the reason why he maintains that high trust rating, because he's blunt, he's brutal in his pronouncements, and he really is not afraid to say things against those people whom he thinks are the enemies of the state. We can cite, for instance, Maynila, the Philippine Airlines, when they had this issue with the government with respect to the collection of fees. And this is to the tune of billions of pesos. Any other president wouldn't be able to confront these oligarchs face to face. And with regard to the second question, I think it's important for us to really consider institutional reforms more than, say, the attributes or qualities of persons that we put into power. Okay. There's something specific about the second question. What was that again? So can you, MC, can you read that?
Mute. All right. So the second question is, would you agree with Duterte that presidency is not for women?
Okay. When the president says things like that, as I mentioned, he's a very blunt man, so he speaks his mind, he's frank. But I don't really think that what he means is that women cannot become presidents. Okay, so, and the problem with some of his detractors and critics is that they take everything that he says at face value. Now, you have to consider also what government is doing and the programs of government in terms of gender and development in local government units and even in public colleges and universities, where it's really considered as obligatory to institute these gender-based programs in order to empower women. Eh, I think if I may, like, put my 2 cents worth, you know, he has this argument against Lenny Robredo, and that statement is meant for Lenny Robredo, but not for all other women who I suppose are equally empowered to dream of and aspire for the highest position in the country. Okay. Tama na yung Twinkle. na
Last question, sir.
okay lang kahit may mga marami pang, I mean, yung position ko as regard to the question on women, kasi it's difficult, to say things against women, very dangerous.
Okay, so I believe, Engineer Padilla, your question has already been answered. So we have another question from Mr. Jerry Arambala. Based on the kind of political experiences that our country has been experiencing with Duterte being the president, sir, are we still on the road towards radical reformation?
Now, we have to understand what we mean by radical. Okay, so kasi in life, there are things that we just accept. If Jerry is listening, there are things that we think that we cannot change. Okay, and when we mention the word radical, we mean that it's not just improvement, but it's a dismantling of what we consider as unacceptable. So, for instance, if a man is born poor, I was born very poor, not only poor, but very poor, and you accept things for what they are, and so you say that it's my fate, and this is what God wants me to be. Now, what prevents me from changing the course of my life is really those perceptions, those things that make me worry about what will happen next. And we live in such a situation wherein we are resigned to our fate that the country's fortunes will not change. I don't believe that. It's like writing a paper and getting rejected. There's no difference really. It's like pursuing a woman and getting rejected. If you accept rejection for what it is and maintain what a woman and how a woman makes that judgment on your character, then your life will not change. But if you believe that there is really something that you can do about it, then you will change yourself and make another strategy and pursue your plans. In the same way as you can revise a paper so that it gets to be accepted. What is crucial is that you know your aspirations in the same way as you realize your questions, and when it comes to women, you know why this woman is important in your life, that she's someone you cannot live without. A country is like that. We have to believe in ourselves. We have to give young people hope. We must not discourage them. Our old generation has failed us if we are to believe ourselves. But our job in this world is to insist that there are things that we cannot just accept. Poverty is a scandal. I cannot die a poor man. I cannot die single. If I want this woman, I will want this woman. I will do everything to get this woman. Even if God disagrees with me, who cares about what God thinks? So the only thing that you care about is that thing that will change your life and will allow you to live life to the fullest. A country should be like that. So the president has won the presidency because he had that mindset. You cannot talk and say that parang hindi pangulo nagsasalita. So, it's not like that. So, because you have to battle giants and dragons. So, but you know, in in terms of battling giants and these things that to others are only imaginary, all battles are actually won inside the mind. So every war is won on the basis of a strategy. If in our head we do not believe and think that we can have a country that will provide us a life that we deserve, then we shouldn't go out and vote. But if we believe in our heart that there's something that we can do, and really we have to pursue these things and aspire for the best, inspire people, and give it a shot. That's what we mean by being radical. So I finished from a public school. Should I say that I too will be like many of my classmates, resigned to the fate that I might not go beyond or move forward? So I was not, I'll just say, I was not born handsome, meaning I'm an ugly man. Should that mean that I too will have to suffer my fate and not allow myself to experience the comfort that God can allow me, if only and only if I use some of my talents? It just requires a little bit of inspiration. Jerry Twinkle? You know Jerry Arambala?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Are you a teacher or are you a student?
I am a student and Sir
Okay.
Jerry Pala is my teacher.
Okay. He's very handsome. Okay. He's the most prominent graduate student at the University of San Carlos. So, well, this was prior to his marriage. He had many girlfriends in Cebu. Diba? So you can just imagine. From every corner of the street. Diba? So what I'm saying is that his question is really a pseudo question. Diba? So, because his philosopher is pseudo Dionysius. Diba? So, and you see, let's look at a man. If you look at the Facebook, profile of Jerry, you do not see Risa there. So what you see is a man with his son. That's what a father is. But at home, really, he's a very beautiful husband. Diba? He cooks. He makes everything. He solves the problems Risa is facing, and that is what is expected of a man. Now, when it comes to politics, in the same way as we expect our leader to solve our problems for us. So that's the point. And when we talk about, say, the kind of government that we deserve, so more than the qualities, however, of a leader, we have to look into the systems that are in our basic institution and begin to think as to how we can reform this system so that people will get the kind of government that they deserve in this country. Okay, thank you.
All right, thank you so much for that. And I believe, Sir Arambala, your question has been answered well by Dr. Christopher. So we have more questions to go, sir.
It's okay, Twinkle. Okay, please.
We have another question from Mark Leo Retuerto. Sir, good morning. Why do these people, knowing that they are elite or rich enough, tend to still corrupt and steal the money of the nation and the masses? Does this really happen to a person when he or she enters politics?
It's a question of two things. Number one, because of the lack of transparency in government. And secondly, it's because of the powerlessness of the people. This feeling of this sense of impunity, where you believe that you're powerful and you cannot be punished, is something that is instituted in a society. If that society lacks the requisite of a good and transparent government, and in the absence of this transparency, and since we have not seen big fishes being put into prison, then these cabals really will have the guts to do what they think they can do, insofar as they do not fear punishment. And so that's the reason really, and it's a systemic problem And in the absence of, say, like concrete examples of people being punished for being corrupt, then of course we do not expect change soon due to that reality, Twinkle.
All right, thank you so much, sir. So
Okay.
at this point, we will be entertaining last two questions. First question is from the College of Arts and Sciences Dean, Mr. Benjamin Labastin. Sir Ryan, you mentioned earlier how Singapore and China achieve economic growth. Opening their economies to foreign capital has been crucial to this, as you have said. Do you think the nationalist sentiment of some sectors in the Philippines has hindered us in attaining economic growth? In particular, this nationalist sentiment has been used to preserve the 60-40 economic provision in the Constitution. So once again, Sir Ryan, you mentioned earlier how Singapore and China achieve economic growth. Opening their economies to foreign capital has been crucial to this, as you have said. Do you think the nationalist sentiment of some sectors in the Philippines has hindered us in attaining economic growth? In particular, this nationalist sentiment has been used to preserve the 60-40 economic provision in the Constitution.
Thank you, Benji, for the question. We are in a global environment, and globalization is something that has forced states to really connect with the rest of the world. Now, it results to several consequences. The first of which is the reality that since we are a small country, we do not have the leverage against powerful and affluent states. And so, because these big countries, including corporations, influence global policy, we are at the receiving end of the negative impact of globalization. Now, secondly, when it comes to globalization, there is not only the movement of resources, there is also the movement of peoples. And one crucial factor as to why the Philippines has managed to stay the course in the last few years is really the remittances from overseas Filipino workers. Without the 8 million Filipinos working abroad, we wouldn't have that $20 billion annual remittances, which serves as a stimulus to economy. Without that, we cannot expect malls to be built and many of these consumer-driven industries to flourish. And yet, it's also problematic at the same time insofar as to really create wealth. You cannot rely on consumption. You have to manufacture goods. And that is our problem. I mentioned foreign direct investments because without FDIs, you cannot build these factories that can export these products, which at the same time will benefit our people in terms of jobs and export revenues. Now, thirdly, the sentiment against globalization is in view of the, say, worry against this global hegemonic order. So the idea is that if you try to look at it, Duterte welcomed China, although a lot of the promises of China, they tried to mention a figure, and that was something like $24 billion, but like only a small part of that has been concretized in terms of investments in the country. A huge part of that is still to be realized. And Duterte chose China because he believed that China had the power to be able to really initiate and create a kind of impact that will resuscitate our ailing economy. Yet a lot of that is still to be realized insofar as every powerful nation really thinks of national interest first before their own. China has invested more than $1 trillion or so in its Belt and Road Initiative. A lot of it is for Europe, Eastern Europe to be exact. But as to South Asia and the ASEAN region, um, a lot still needs to be realized. The thing is, 10 years ago, China was the biggest debtor of the World Bank. Right now, China actually is the biggest contributor to the funds of the World Bank, meaning to say it is now the biggest lender via the World Bank. And we have to understand that even if we open our economy, it's not automatic that as if, say, these investors will relocate to the country. We still have to consider also policies that will be, from the viewpoint of these investors, beneficial to them. And that includes tax breaks, which means that for a period, say, of 5 years, they will not be paying the government any tax. The only benefit that we get is that by means of the projects that they pour in is that it generates jobs for our people and so therefore income to households. Yet the sentiment against, say, opening the country really and doing away with the 60-40 is like reminiscent of the past. So if we try to look into our situation right now, our problem is that while we can easily forget the sins of the past, we are not actually doing anything in order to change the ill impact of past policies. And so lastly, we have to realize that we cannot just rely on our own. We have to open up the economy. And while Secretary Dominguez actually is against the 60-40 because he believes that you have to protect national interests, because the danger with giving away 100% ownership to our land, so by foreigners, is that there are some security concerns. For instance, if you consider the Hanjin Subic shipyard, so the two Chinese companies wanted to take over, but the government said no because of security threats. It's not really security threats, but it's more of appeasing the United States. Because if you allow China to enter into the picture, it might have a ripple effect as to the territorial integrity of the country. And so it becomes a global security concern. And the country cannot afford that. And so it's a thing that we must be able to look into. So, and the devil is in the details. And in this regard, it's really difficult. And it's not just therefore because of our nationalist sentiment, but it's because of the reality of the global political order and the hegemonic economic order in the world that we have to look into. Well, our experience, because we are a victim of colonization, is of course we have to protect our interests and we must not allow foreign say ownership of our land. Why? Because it brings back the bad memories of the past, where Filipinos cannot own land, and we allow foreigners to own land. It is an insult against the poor Filipino who cannot even afford a parcel of land that he will reserve before he dies. And however, policy-wise and from a macro perspective, I suppose it's high time to consider and look into possibilities of allowing foreign investments. So, insofar as if we do not open up, the problem kasi if you have a 60-40, a foreign investor will have to look for a Filipino counterpart who will have to provide for this 40% requirement. And if no Filipino is interested of partnering with a foreign company, then you have a problem as regard to relocating a foreign investor and his capital to the country because of that sort of partnership that is necessary and required by law. So what is happening is that de facto, while you have that, what is happening is that money actually is provided by these foreign companies, and they just let a Filipino subsidiary or a dummy to buy land for them, so that it will appear that as if a Filipino owns this part of the company, and this land is say a property of this Filipino dummy, when in truth money, really all the money comes from the foreigner. And to be able to overcome that, we have to look into our policies and begin to consider what we really want for the future. And if we open ourselves to this, we have to realize that there are repercussions, but at the same time, we have to consider also the future and its benefit to the people if in the long run we allow 100% ownership of land.
Mhm. All right, so thank you so much. I believe, Sir Labastin, your question has been answered already. All right, so as much as we love to cater all of your questions, but we are running out of time. And so at this point, I would like to have the honor to present all of you the certificate of appreciation to our guest speaker this morning. Certificate of appreciation is given to Dr. Christopher Ryan Maboloc for sharing his time and expertise as the speaker of the Pinoy Power Voters Education webinar during the Lasallian Family Days 2021 with the theme LSU, Our Family, Our Home. Given this 18th of March 2021 from Lasalle University, Ozamis City, Philippines, signed by the President of the University Student Government, Mr. Zaid J. Salfanta, Director for Student Affairs, Dr. Chidel Joan San Diego, and the Vice President for Lasallian Mission, Brother Butch Antolin Alcudia III, FSC. Once again, Certificate of Appreciation is given to Dr. Christopher Ryan Maboloc. Thank you so much, sir.
It has been my pleasure and my honor. Thank you for your time, attention, and keep yourselves safe. And God bless you all. Good luck sa exams ninyo. And next year I would like to send this message to the students. A lot of you are not actually registered, so you register and you choose a candidate that you believe is close to your heart. My wife voted for Gibo Chodoro in 2010. I voted for PINOY. I was wrong. My wife is right. I do not know what Gibo Chodoro's plans will be in 2022. But that's just an example of us sometimes listening to those people close to us. And on my part, I should have listened to my wife. Okay. Thank you.
All right, so thank you so much once again, Mr. Christopher. All right, to other students who have still questions, you may send your questions via isco@lsu.edu.ph. Once again, to those who still have questions, you may send them through isco@lsu.edu.ph. All right, moving on. Before we come to a close, let's first give the floor to our Dean of Student Affairs, Dr. Chidel Joan G. San Diego.
Maayong Lasan, Article 5, Section 1 of the 1987 Philippine Constitution states that suffrage is the right and obligation to vote of qualified citizens in the election of a certain nation and local officers of the government and in the decision of public questions submitted to the people. The Social Concerns Center, together with the University Student Government, designed this voters educational webinar in order for the Lasallian students to be educated of your power to vote, especially in the upcoming national election in the year 2022. Based on what you have heard from our high caliber speaker, my hope and prayer is that you were able to know and distinguish your basic rights in suffrage as Filipino citizens. And I hope you are able to gain knowledge as to how are you going to participate as a potential voter in the forthcoming election. As a true Lasallians, my hope and prayer that you will cast your vote wisely. My hope and prayer that you will choose a good leader that will help us to live a better life in this country. Daghan kaayong salamat sa pag-participate, and most especially to our high caliber speaker. Thank you so much. Leave Jesus always in our heart, and Animo Lasal.
Thank you so much, Dr. Chidel. All right, so we would like to thank our 200 plus viewers on YouTube and Facebook, and as well as to our 100 participants via Zoom. All right, for your registration or for your attendance, make it sure to fill out the Google form posted in the comment section below. And our attendance code for this webinar is Election 2022. Once again, our attendance code is Election 2022. Make sure to fill up the Google form after 15 minutes.
And lucky 7 soy sauce.
Alright, so once again, our attendance code is Election 2022.
Chocolates.
And we request everyone to fill out
The bronze category. 1 apple tree. For our regular sponsors. Hungry Food Corner. Gats Bar. Mon's Grill. Tureen Car Wash.
Thank you all for attending the Pinoy Power webinar. Indeed, voting is the most precious right of every citizen, and we have a moral obligation to ensure the integrity of our voting process. If you don't mind, may I request everyone to turn on your cameras for the photo op. All right, so once again, may I request everyone to turn on your cameras for the photo op and smile in front of the camera. All right, so can you all now smile in 1, 2, 3, smile. So another 1, 2, 3, smile. Another, very last. 1, 2, 3, smile. All right, so thank you so much, everyone. And for more details about our celebration of the Lasallian Family Days 2021, please check the LSU official Facebook page, www.facebook.com/lsu.edu.ph. And then before we end this event, we would like to extend our utmost gratitude for spending your time with us. Let us explore, learn, and have fun together in this celebration. Again, do not forget to like and visit the LaSalle University Ozamis Facebook page to get regular updates of our celebration. Let me plug in the upcoming awarding ceremony of the Lasallian Family Days 2021, which will take place tomorrow, March 19 at 2 p.m. And later, we will be having the wannabe competition and the Clash of Councils at 2 p.m. This and a lot of surprises are in store for you to celebrate the Lasallian Family Days 2021. Surely this is an experience that you do not want to miss. This has been Twinkle Gama saying that voting is not only our right, it is our power. Thank you so much. Stay safe and animo Lasal.
The University Student Government of LaSalle University would like to thank the following sponsors. For gold category, we have Paglao Multipurpose Cooperative, Lucis Studios, and JSB Events and Prints.
For silver category, Star Candle and Lucky 7 soy sauce. Gasa chocolates. For bronze category, Bon Appetit. For our regular sponsors, Hungry Food Corner. Gats Bar. Mon's Grill. Dream Car Wash. 64th Street. Numerous Lechon Food House. Zarek Online Shop. And for our student-led business and the three major sponsor, we have Green Forest Space. Thank you for choosing LaSalle University as one of your trusted partners. Animo LaSalle.
Sa amihan ng dapit, diri sa Mindanao, puno sa kaagi, usog sa kultura ug mga istorya. Ang universidad sa syudad sa Uzamis, dinhi sa Lasal, kasaysayan, di gyud malimtan. Yapyakan daw, maayong adlaw, maayong muto, diha ka ninyo, mapiyagagawi, maayong gabi, diri sa Lasal, diri tabay. Pagtuo, serbisyo, pagtuo, serbisyo, pagtuo, serbisyo, pagtuo, serbisyo para serbisyo para yeah, yeah. Serbisyo para yeah, yeah. Serbisyo para yeah, yeah. Kapyakan daw, maayong adlaw, maayong muto, diha ka ninyo, mapiyagagawi, maayong gabi, diri sa Lasal. Kapyakan daw, maayong adlaw, maayong muto, diha ka ninyo, mapiyagagawi, madlaw maayong ito diha ka ninyo mapiyag gagawi maayong gabi diri sa Lasal diri sa Lasal diri sa Lasal diri tabay